brand stands right now and which areas you need to work on to improve. So where do you start? I've heard a lot of presentations on segmentation. I've read a lot of blogs, and it can seem a little overwhelming at first. There's just so many different things you can do and so many different things that people tell you to do. But again, I think I challenge everyone to take a step back and look at what matters to your business and how you're doing things, and then what can you learn from that to become better. So I have 4 main points that I think about when I think about segmentation. Really, anything in e-commerce is, 1, it should be measurable. 2, it should be actionable. So one of the things is, hey, you can segment by VIPs or window shoppers or anything else. Well, can you actually do that? And is that actionable for your business? If you know that VIPs buy more, where does that leave you? You might say, well, how do we make more VIPs? Well, that's an interesting fact, but that doesn't necessarily have to do with how you segment your emails. So the first 2 points are super important. 3, it should operate within the workflow you currently have for email. So again, if you have 1 person kind of doing email or 2 people, make sure that the framework for what they can do, you're actually asking them to deliver on that. So you don't want to segment a million different ways if you only have 1 person actually responsible for the creation of those emails and sending out of those emails. Make sure you're setting the bar for what your business can actually do. And last but not least, it doesn't have to be right the first time. I can't tell you how many times I probably did it wrong. Luckily, I just bugged Zach, who's in the audience, enough times at Klaviyo, and he kept giving me better answers. But really, you just need to start somewhere. You need to kind of come up with this framework that works within your business, and then start and improve. Because if you don't start, you can't improve. All right, so with that, how do we go about executing? So I stole this from Agatha's presentation on segmentation, and I changed a couple of the headlines, and I'll go through this, but this is the framework that I use to set up segmentation at Taylor Stitch. And you can print this out, you can fill it in, and it just helps you to wrap your head around what the heck are we doing and why are we doing it. So there's a bunch of empty bubbles, but it starts with what's the goal, what's our overlying strategy to get there, business KPIs, so what are the key KPIs for your business that are going to drive growth? Does that match your email strategy? Then what are the new ideas, and what do those segments look like? So let's go through what I did at Taylor Stitch. So my goal was to raise revenue from the email channel. My strategy, which is why everyone's here. Test and execute efficient segmentation. So the business KPIs that I looked at were, what are the average number of purchases that we had in 12 months? What's the average time in between purchases, especially like first purchase to second purchase? So for us at Taylor Stitch, it was 2.3 average number of purchases, so say 2. Average time in between purchases was anywhere between 30 to 60 days. And we sent 120 emails a year to every customer. So customers are buying twice from us, usually within like a set time period, and yet we're sending 120 emails to them. That didn't make any sense, because the majority of those emails don't matter to the customer. So when I looked at sending emails, it wasn't about how many recipients, well, it is to a degree about how many recipients got the email, but it's more so sending it to the most engaged people, each different email. All right, so this is a lot of text, but bear with me. So in the new ideas, one of the important things to remember is you need a control group every time you run one of these tests. So in segmentation, what you're trying to do is you're trying to take your list, and you have an idea, and you're trying to see how much of that portion of the list accounts for the revenue of each email we send. So my first one was segment of similarly viewed products. So Taylor Stitch comes out with a whole array of products. We sell shirts, pants, jackets, shoes. So each product that we came out with, my first question was, if I could find people that viewed similar products, what percentage of those people make up the revenue from that email? My second test was recently opened email. So I thought, okay, you could look at different products, but do you still care about the brand? Are you still engaged with the brand? Are you still interested in it? So in each one of these, I have a laser pointer here. Oh, nope. The control group is just the list So our whole list minus the specific segment I'm sending to. So in each one of these, I ran this test over 2 or 3 emails to see how important this part of the segment was to our overall revenue. So for similarly viewed products, I did segment of opted-in emails and recently viewed product. For the segment of recently opened, I did the segment test was opted-in emails and recently opened or clicked email. And I'll go through the actual nuts and bolts of what one of these segments looks like in a second. And then you can put it together. I think you'll find that the first test and the second test are pretty critical and actually the customers on your list that are driving revenue. So then have the control group versus combining them together. So recently opened email or product viewed. So have they recently opened an email or have they looked at a similar product in the past? If you're a brand that has less SKUs, you can still tailor this to fit in with your brand, whether is it a repeat purchase product that someone needs to come back for and buy often? Is it a product that if you buy one, you're more likely to buy something else, even though there's not that many SKUs that you could buy? So at Taylor Stitch, just because you bought a shirt doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to buy pants from us, but in different brands, like if you bought you bought basketball shoes, and we sell basketball shirts and shorts, I would venture to say you probably need those as well, and those customers would be likely to buy from you. Yeah, so putting it all together. So this is so when I started with segmentation, what I thought about is what is the product that we're releasing? Let's start there. And then who the heck is going to care that this product is being released on this day, and who should we email? So this is our long haul jacket. It's a denim jacket. So in this example, I work backwards, so let's start there. And this is a breakdown of one of the segments that I have. So in each one of these boxes, you can think of the between as an or statement. So at the beginning, I asked, are they new to the list so they don't know what they're interested in? Then I want to email them a wide variety of things to see what do they click on, what are they engaging with, what are they actually most likely to purchase. The second one is, as I talked about, have they viewed similar products? So in each one of these are different categories that either ladder back into men's outerwear for us, denim, something that is loosely related to the product that we're coming out with. A third part of the segment here is have they opened emails about the product or similar products in the past? So what I try to do is balance older and new emails to try to cast the widest net of people that could possibly be engaged with the product or possibly be interested in the product we're sending out. And then a lot of today is going to be talking about flows and kind of automated behaviors. The really interesting part in that is those flows are based off of an action a user takes. So what happens is if a user abandons the cart, they came to the site in some way, shape, or form, they looked at a product, they added it to their cart, and then they abandoned. Well, that email I want to be on like the hierarchy of sending them, the primary email they receive. So no matter when they abandon that cart, I don't want them to get, if we're sending a campaign email at the same time, the campaign email, I want them to get the abandoned cart because that's the highest likelihood that they're going to convert. And the same for if you have browse abandonment, they viewed a product and they left, they became a VIP. These messages are tailored to how a customer has interacted with your brand, and those should be held higher on the hierarchy than, hey, we have a new product, or hey, we have a product back in stock. So this is just excluding individuals, and you can have multiple flows that have entered into a flow. Let them get that communication before we send them another marketing communication. 5, have they recently purchased a product? For us, I think when someone actually purchases a product, I don't want to hit them up with, hey, you should buy a whole new thing before you've even gotten that product yet and experienced it, especially if they're a first-time customer. So I want to give them some breathing room after they buy a product. One of the things you could do is like post-purchase. Someone buys a product, I want them to enter into a whole new communication stream than like, hey, we have a new product, you should buy this as well. And then finally, one of my favorites that I think has worked really well for us, it's hard to tell, but like, have we sent them too many irrelevant emails in the past 2 weeks? So you're sending, I don't know how many emails people here are sending, but you're probably sending at least 1 a week, if not 2 or 3. What happens is if a user gets a lot of irrelevant emails, they may not unsubscribe, but they'll just stop opening your emails. So again, back to that, how many times has a customer purchased in 12 months? If someone purchases 2 times and we send them 120 emails, well, that's way too many emails to be sending someone who's going to purchase 2 times. And so in this, I wanted to set a cap, like saying, have we emailed you too many times in the past couple days? Here I said received email is less than 3 in the past 7 days. Or if they've opened at least 1 email in the past 7 days, that's OK, because they still prefer email communication from you. But all these segments are dynamic. So what happens is if a customer rotates out, they're going to rotate back in the next time I'm launching or releasing a product or have something to say that I think that customer is going to be interested in. So that way, you're not just bombarding people's inboxes. You're taking time to say, hey, we sent this person too many messages that they don't care about. Let's let them have a breather until we release that next thing that's actually going to matter to them. That actually is something that we send them. They're like, oh, great, I want to open. And so I don't work at Klaviyo. I'm not here to upsell you. But it is interesting that to share the results. Like, does this stuff work? Yes, it absolutely works. At Taylor Stitch, we actually sent, our list grew 45% from 2016 to 2017. I sent 5% less emails during that time span. But I made over 30% more in revenue, which was close to $1 million. Which is just absolutely insane. Like, if you told me I could do less and actually make more, like if your boss was like, hey, if you worked 6 hours a week for 5 days, could you still accomplish the same amount you could with 8 hours? I feel like everyone here would be in agreement for that, but I don't think your boss would be. And so actually having something that says, hey, look, we're sending too many emails. How do we do this smarter? How do we do this better? Resulted in a huge revenue growth for Taylor Stitch. And then we randomly selected 2,000 of our customers, and we surveyed them. We surveyed them each year. And one of the questions we asked last year was, how do you feel about our email sending? They had 3 choices. 1, hey, you guys send too much email, slow down. Hey, you send just the right amount of email. And then 3, which I think 0% of our customers answered, you send too little email. You should send more. But 70% of our customers said we send just the right amount of emails. We didn't just survey VIPs. We didn't just survey handpicked people that we think would respond well. And so that, to me, was another data point that just showed, hey, what we're doing is barking up the right tree, is getting to something on a personalization on scale that's also repeatable and actionable. All right. And so with that, my presentation is done. And I wanted to save a lot of time for Q&A because, again, the way you segment, the way you approach things is going to be different for all businesses. So I just wanted to have a good conversation and be able to answer any questions that anyone has.
Yeah, you talked a lot about that you did a lot with flows. So I wonder, after those basic flows, cart abandon, welcome, or pre-purchase and all that, what sort of other stuff did you go into that you haven't seen before yet? That's not so basic.
I think a big one is post-purchase that a lot of brands don't think about. Most of your customers, once they purchase, they're way more likely to purchase again within a very short time span. And so communicating with that customer in a way that's relevant is going to increase your CLV, is going to increase the number of purchases people make in a 12-month period. Because really, when a customer purchases, there's a set time window that matters a lot more than the rest of the 12 months. So that was something, Black Friday and Cyber Monday, doing the segmentation and kind of seeing who was engaging with emails was really big. For us, those 5 days represented about 15% of our revenue, which is absolutely petrifying as well. But kind of segmenting and having different messages, so that was a time where I actually created a bunch of different email looks. So we have sort of different brand archetypes. One guy likes to go up in the mountains. Another guy rides his motorcycle. So tailoring the messaging and the imagery together was something that over that time span, we were able to send a lot more emails and a lot more emails that are relevant. And that made us That drove a lot of the revenue growth that we saw. So, I think it's very dependent on the business you're working with and what they're doing, but if you know the key metrics that drive that business, then, hey, how can we get people from 2 to 3 purchases? That's really important to get people from 1 to 2, right? Because you're going to have so many people sitting in this one. And so thinking about from a flow perspective, how do we automate that? And how do we, for browse abandonment, if someone looks at your product, a lot of it, I think, is the creative way you tell these stories or you showcase these things. So how many times have you looked at a product and you gotten retargeted with that exact product? I mean, it kind of works, but if it's a higher value product, so if your cart value is 150 or greater, that's a decent amount of change for that person to give over to you. So if they've looked at your product and didn't purchase, back into what are the reasons we think this customer didn't purchase from us. Hey, can we give social proof? Hey, how do we show the value of this product? And then how do you do that across multiple products? And that's what I would use for a browse abandonment flow, viewed a product and didn't purchase. How do we reinforce the things that matter in the brand to new customers instead of just showing them the product that they looked at with similar products underneath? Did that kind of answer your question?
Do you prevent, because you also mentioned, for example, cart abandon for you is the highest in the sort of, if they're in that, we don't want them to get regular campaigns, right? But then you have all these flows, so you sort of tag people that are in different flows to prevent them to, to clash with some other stuff that they're, because if they're like the biker guy, right, that you send promotions to, like how do you make sure that they don't get targeted by your other, active campaign segment and they hit them with that as well, right?
So yeah, again, it depends how often you're sending campaigns. Like we're sending campaigns on a specific day. So for us, it's Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. So in each one of the segments, when I'm sending a campaign out, I just exclude anyone who has entered a flow. So if you've entered any sort of flow, I want to prioritize that message over whatever campaign message I have. Again, if you're sending an email every day and you have a lot of different flows, that can be a complicated journey that I'm sure someone at Klaviyo can help you with. But it's all about what's the most important email you want to send and how can we make sure the customer gets that message. Yeah, sure.
What's the most effective segmentation or or filter for a win back or cleanup series? And also, what are your top 3 subject lines that have been the most effective?
Great question. For a win back campaign, I may be against the grain here, but I feel like if someone has stopped opening your emails, I don't care how great you make that next email, they're probably not going to open it. So one of the ways is, hey, can we target them on social with a message that's going to re-engage them? Hey, you could do direct mail. What can we do to re-engage that customer? I think if you lost a customer via email, I tried it and it just didn't work, and I was like, well, that makes sense. So I haven't done much with win-back campaigns, but again, I think that group of customers who aren't interested in your emails, sending them an additional email, campaign email either, is not going to work. So making sure that the emails I'm sending to people are opening helped our sending reputation. So just knowing like, hey, these people aren't interested in emails, let's not email them. And as far as subject lines, man, it's been all over the place. Like sometimes shorter works, sometimes it doesn't. I think for Taylor Stitch at least, it has more to do with, are you interested in the brand? And honestly, anything we put in the subject line, if I spend 30 minutes thinking of a subject that's really intriguing, it might lift open rates by like 3 or 4%. But in general, I really feel like, are you interested in the brand? Are you not? Is what's happened with us when we send emails. So I actually haven't put too much time and thought into subject. I did in sending times, and for us later in the day worked, which is really surprising. I think a lot of brands send emails at the same time. So being able to stand out in the inbox, again, I'm not saying that later is the king, but being able to stand out in the inbox at a specific time is kind of interesting. Like, can your brand own a time? I don't know, but it's definitely something interesting to think about.
When is a segment too small?
Great question. Our VIP segment is like 1,500 people. Again, I don't segment and just send them a separate email, but I do on Black Friday. So anytime we have a sale, I give them access to a sale a day early. That email usually makes us about $40 to $50 per email send. So again, it's very specific, right? It's a sale email, so it's going to make more money in general. But that email itself is sending it to 2,000 people is making us $80,000. But from a campaign perspective, I try to aim for the segment to be at least, at minimum, 30% size of the list. I think it could be greater or smaller depending on how big your list is. Or you may figure out that your list size doesn't matter and 10% of that list is driving 95% of the revenue. Well, in that case, if you can get to like 12 or 13%, you're probably doing it right. So different lists matter more or less for who I'm sending emails to. But you do want the segment to be big enough to matter. Like if we stop making as much, I can't tell you how many times I had to tell our CEO that we weren't going to email the entire list for every email. And he kept telling me, well, how much revenue are we going to lose? No, trust me on this. But again, like I wouldn't want to have to go to him and be like, we actually made less money. That didn't actually work at all. So to figure that out, it's a balancing act. Is that helpful? Yeah.
So we have about 21 minutes left for questions. Let's create a little bit of a queue here. So can you raise your hand if you have a question? Got one over there.
It's kind of hard to see
mic
back here.
Perfect.
And then
got
you're
two
next.
people.
Yeah.
Great.
You and then.
So I noticed you have the 20% off on the homepage. Have you balanced that against feeling like you're just kind of giving away money to people that visit? And then, what does that sequence or that segment look like for getting people from 0 to 1 as far as purchases?
Great question. That's actually probably the most important thing that we've done. So a lot of people do ask, like, hey, should we give 10, 15%? What's the minimum discount we can give out? For me, I said, hey, if our conversion rate is 2%, that's amazing. Still means we're losing 98% of people coming to the site to purchase. Most important thing is if you've never purchased from us and you come to the site and you leave without purchasing, I've lost. Like, it's really hard to there are a lot of brands and software out there that say they can do it. I'm not going to speak to how well they can, but it's still really hard to do that. And so for us, I just said, what's the maximum discount I can give out the first time and still be somewhat profitable and still be okay with giving that out? Because if you came to the site and you don't purchase, we lose. Another thing we figured out is coupon codes can be a blessing and a curse. A lot of people were emailing in, hey, we forgot our coupon code, hey, nah, nah, nah. And so I worked with our developer to build a script between, we're on Shopify Plus, Klaviyo, and Shopify. So anytime someone signs up for a list, a Shopify account is automatically created. And if it's your first purchase, you get 20% off, no coupon. So that increased conversion rate through our welcome flow a ton. So when people talk about A/B testing or where to start, I'd say start with the biggest thing in your business that's holding people back. And for us, it was because we have such a high AOV on the first purchase, how do we get customers in the door? So really, that was what I focused on. And I also hear a lot about building out welcome series. Well, for us, welcome series after the first email plummets in people opening and people engaging with your brand. I think the word content is one of the most overused marketing buzzwords ever because people don't care about your brand until they care about your brand. And if they do, they'll find the content you're producing. You don't need to put it in front of them. I think there's a way to do it. But when I look at the welcome series, that first email was this is it. If this email doesn't work, it doesn't matter what we do across the board. So that really made me focus relentlessly on how can we make this first email the best experience possible and deliver the message that we want without being over. And then I didn't want to test 10% and 15% off because that's weird if you got the 10% off and someone else is like, hey, I got 15% off. That just feels like a weird customer experience. So again, it's brand specific, but for us, it was figuring out what are the biggest roadblocks in what we're doing and how can we do those best? And our team's really nimble, so I could have tested a million different things, but that would have held up getting that one test that actually mattered across the line.
I got two questions. So one thing you just said brought up another question about your open rate on your first email after they subscribe. What did you do? Actually, right before I came in here, a client called me and said that, hey, our exact question. So what did you do to up that, or what did you do to change that?
You know, one of the things we did was, you know, making sure, again, with the pop-up and you're adding people to the list, you want to be adding people that are engaged, because if you don't change that email too, so one of the things with deliverability is Gmail reads the like HTML code in your email. If you never change that, so even if you change one little thing, if you don't change it, Gmail knows that this email is the same email you've been sending. So if some people marked it as spam, but it has a really high open rate, it's not as likely to hit the inbox. So we changed that welcome email, just the code, a little bit each day. I mean, each quarter.
On that note, what is Klaviyo doing then if we have all these flows that are automated, sending thousands of emails? Are you guys dynamically changing something for that?
So Klaviyo allows you the ability to do that, but you know, at no point in time do I think what I'm doing is the holy grail and 100% right. And yeah, Klaviyo allows me to be able to learn and do this. When I started at Taylor Stitch, I didn't want to open with this, but I didn't know anything about email marketing. I literally had never sent an email campaign in my life. That was 3 years ago. Now I've sent a lot of email campaigns. But if I had just used an agency or used this AI-powered platform tool, then I wouldn't have actually known more or less what I was doing. And I think coming in and having the ability to test and the ability to think through these things and do it in a way that is really easy to get back results is super powerful. It can be overwhelming because there's a million different things to test, but that's why I think you just have to start somewhere, and that's what Klaviyo allows. But for the welcome flow, like we get about 65, 70% open and about 15% click, but I know within a 30-day time window, about 20 to 25% of the people who sign up for our email list actually purchase. And you know, is that good? I don't know. I know that's good for us. And so once that's locked in, you know, I'm not going to spend all this time testing the same thing if I think it's only going to increase to, like, let's say it's 20% and increase to 23%. Well, my time is better spent, and everyone's time is better spent testing something different. Like, that works well enough. Improving that is going to take way more work than fixing something different.
And then my last question is, so one of the big women's clothing companies I work with, they're product driven. They get 100 in and they sell out within 2 hours when they send an email. What can you recommend in that case for, because their flows aren't doing the best, but their campaigns when they do it, you know, are really just product strictly driven? Back in stock that
Klaviyo just released is a flow that's clearly going to work because someone signed up and is interested in the product. What's not going to make it work is if it's back in stock for 2 hours and it's gone. So for a lot of stuff they don't restock. I mean, again, it depends on how the business works. But if they can get that product in there a day before they send the email, you know, if it's sneakers, I know that's not really possible. But whatever you can do to give leverage to the people who have expressed interest before everyone knows it drops, I think is something that's really important to keeping that engagement. Because, you know, if I signed up for a site's back in stock and I missed every product that came back in stock, well, it's not likely I'm going to come back and I'm going to give up on that brand, or, you know, in that case. So I think anything you can do to give those people who have expressed interest a chance to get it, again, I don't think it's a bad thing if things sell out, as long as people know that. And, you know, if that's the case, then making sure across every product page, across every communication, customers know what to expect. You know, Supreme sells a T-shirt for $100 and it resells for $500, and it's a T-shirt, and it sells out within 10 minutes. So, you know, scarcity isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if your customer doesn't know that there's scarcity, then that can be a bad thing.
So still 10 minutes about for questions. We have one up there. Can you guys raise your hand and we'll find another person as well?
I had a question for you. Assisted conversion. Do you ever think about retargeting and, you know, if they come to your email flow, and then they purchase through retargeting through Google or Facebook, or the opposite. They go retargeting and then they go back to email and then they buy. You ever look at attribution either way?
Yes, that's a $1 million question. If I had to answer that, I probably wouldn't be up here. I think you know from being in the business what actual growth is. Each platform is going to want to take 100% of each transaction. So if you are working with an agency or you're the brand and Google said, hey, we got 8,000% ROI, and you look at top line revenue and it increased 3%, they didn't get 8,000% ROI. So, but still, it's valuable to serve that ad to that customer at a specific time. So it's not like don't do that, but you can get into like multi-touch attribution. I just try to look at where was my spend allocation over each month and what happened to top line revenue, and just say, oh, I increased Facebook spend and our revenue increased. Okay, great, I'm gonna keep doing this, or like pull. I don't try to get into the weeds because again, I don't even know if the answer I get would be more valuable than, I just know not to trust any report that has triple-digit ROI in it. Right after him.
All right. Oh, me first?
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the workflow? So you've got a bunch of different segments. You guys send 3 times a week. It sounds, I'm thinking about my business, that would get very complicated very quickly, managing the segments, sending different emails to different people, all of that, and probably mistake prone as well. So how do you handle that?
So that's where it does. So the nice thing about segments is they're dynamic. So I use the same logic that I showed you for each one of the segments, and I create them all at once. So on Monday, when I get in the office, one of the most fun things I do, I create all of our segments for the next 2 weeks. So I know roughly audience size. Again, they're dynamic. So each time we send an email, they're going to change. But we're not tailoring the message. And that was one thing, I don't know if it got across at the beginning, but you hear about all these different segments and different ways to communicate with customers. Taylor Stitch didn't have the ability to do that. Like, there were 2 people, me and another person on the email team. So we couldn't design and tailor all these messages. What I could say is, like, for each message I send out, who's going to care? Who do I think is going to care?
Okay.
And so I was just testing all that segment logic against the exact same email. So for recently viewed products or for recently opened email, I wasn't sending them a different email. I was sending them the same email, and I was just testing, hey, out of our overall list, how much does this segment account for revenue? But if you had more people, you could be sending different messages. Again, it depends on how big the email team is. I would say if you're small, I would just start with the question of who cares.
Right, so you're almost using the segments to make sure that, to reduce the emails you're sending more than it is to
Yes.
send, 3 different emails to 3 different segments.
Because again, we're sending through a week, and we are spending all this time creating it. But I know I work with the brand. I don't want 3 emails a week from Taylor Stitch. So if I know that, then when I was creating the segments, I wanted to make sure I had a repeatable process, but I also had a process that made sure the entire list didn't get every email we sent.
You said you're refreshing or looking at your segments every 2 weeks?
I make them every 2. So I'll look at them before we send the email, but I'll make like the batch for the next 2 weeks at once.
How is it changing from 2-week period to 2-week period?
One of the things that I try to do is like, okay, I know if I can send more targeted emails, that's better. So in that segment I showed you with that long-running list of like criteria, if I can tweak one of those things and it can increase the amount of people we sent to, and not actually increase unsubscribes or open rate plummets or whatever else, then that's successful. So what I look at on like a weekly or like bi-weekly period is how many people did we actually send to and what happened to the very top line stats. So I'm not looking on a per email basis, I'm looking on a roll up, hey, each week, how many people we send to, open, click, revenue per recipient's a big one because it just standardizes a bunch of those other metrics. and then revenue, and say, okay, hey, I know it's not going to change much, but week over week, we're able to send to 2% more people, and revenue slightly increased. Okay, I'll keep doing that and trying that, and if it holds, then I'll add. If I change the criteria to my segments, I'll hold that. Does that kind of answer your question?
Well,
I feel like no. I feel like no.
I'm probably just not clear enough to be able to think how I'd implement that myself.
So in the segment, each one of those is some logic-based condition. So like maybe I think for the sending to too many people, let's say I increase it to 4 emails in the past 7 days instead of 3. That's going to send to more people because there's less people who have received 4 emails than 3 emails from us. And if that actually doesn't decrease revenue or unsubscribes or open rate over time, then maybe it is 4 emails in 7 days. That's the right amount that I should put for that, like, hey, don't send this person too many emails. I don't know the right answer, but I randomly picked 3 because I was like, well, 3 feels like a lot of emails in 7 days. So week over week, what I'm trying to look at is like, hey, is there a simple change I can do to one of these, and does it actually drive results for us?
Do you add that that rule to most of the segments then?
Yeah, every segment.
Every segment.
Quick question on how you are tracking your attribution and revenue on your email. Are you looking, given that you send like Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, and flow emails, do you have your window on Klaviyo at like 1 day or 2 days? 1 day? Is that, do you think, just for benchmarking purposes, do you find that to be pretty accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, like if you're sending less emails, you could do 2 days. If you're sending email every day, I might do 12 hours. Again, it depends on how often you're sending emails. But the great thing about Klaviyo's tracking, and again, you would think I work for Klaviyo, but I don't, is that a lot of people are going to open emails on their mobile device on the way to work or whatever. They're not going to buy a $100 shirt on the way to work on their mobile phone unless they're really VIPs. They're going to maybe buy it when they get to their desktop. Well, whatever retargeting service I use to hit them on their desktop is going to take 100% credit for that. Really, it was because I sent them an email in the morning that they actually opened. So I think Klaviyo is actually better set to say how much revenue came from email than if you're looking at GA because it's last click. And a lot of people may not click on an email, but they're still purchase. And so open rate is super important.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Glad you guys have a lot of questions because I was worried my presentation was going to be too short, but.
Can you do one more here?
Yeah.
Did you do a lot of testing with more text-based versus more picture-based, and how much effort do you put on design, especially if with just 2 people in the team?
Yeah, my designer hated me, but text-based typically does better. Again, I think the text in the email, if you're a bigger brand and your campaign emails are text only, that feels weird. It may work for a little bit, but it's probably going to be an outlier unless, Chubby's does a really good job of sending text-only emails that are funny and engaging. So again, I think it depends on the situational use of the email. But one of the tests we did was we used to have these really long emails with like we have beautiful imagery. That's definitely a strength of the brand. And so we showed these emails with all these product photos and everything. And I was like, shoot, everyone's just clicking on the hero image. Why are we making these long emails? Like, does that even make sense? And the designer was like, just look at it. And I was like, yeah, but it takes you like 15 minutes. Like, what if it took you 5 and you just used 1 image? And the hero image ended up performing just as well as the long email, and so we cut out a lot. And that was just from a resources perspective. We were spending too much time on something that, my designer. But I was like, you can work on other projects that, that matter more. So.
We have time for about 2 more questions.
I know she's had her hand raised. Sorry, it's also hard to see people because the light is shining in your face.
Thank you. My question is more around the segmentation. You said you come in the office, you have 3 emails you have to send out throughout the week, and then you make new segments on every 2 weeks or something like that. My question is, why? Like, if you have the segments and they work, like, why would you make new segments every 2 weeks to send 3 emails? I guess I'm just not understanding it.
Oh, yeah. So each segment that you look at is dynamic. So each one of those things changes per email. So we're not sending 3 emails out about the same product. We're sending one about a shirt, one about a jacket that's made from like some specific fabric, one about shoes. So each one of those segments is going to be different based on what that product is. So they're always changing based on the product, but the logic behind them doesn't change. So each one of those conditions I went through, that stays the same. I'm just answering that for every product.
And you guys are getting like new arrivals and stuff like that, so it's a bit different for somebody who we do hair products. So
Okay.
we have the same, 15 products. You know what I mean? Mine may not be as dynamic.
Well, what I would think about there is like, what's the important thing you want to tell about those products and what do they roll up to? So if you're doing skincare products, I'm sure there's like different types of skincare products I can buy based on how my skin is, so what are those like bigger laddering up categories that you can do and what are those messages? And then make sure that, someone who has dry skin receives the right messaging versus someone who's different, and how many people on our list fall into the dry skin category, how many people on our list fall into this category. My next question would be, if everyone falls into this category, can we get them to fall in that category too? Does that kind of make sense?
Gotcha. And I'm sorry, my last part was, when you did all the segmentation, did that kind of make doing all this content marketing useless because you were able to segment and talk to your people when they needed you? So what was the point of writing a super long blog? You know what I mean? I'm just curious.
Million dollar question. I feel like people in the brand, I know I did, cared about the content maybe more than other people did. There's always unmeasurable things about what you do. I don't think everything you do can be measurable. So if you create a blog with great content, how do you measure that? Because people come to the site, they may not buy, but they might read the blog, care about your brand, and come back later and purchase. So I don't think it makes it irrelevant. I just think it makes it really interesting on what you want to send that customer. So again, like if all of a sudden you segment by kind of more dynamic variables and you figure out that like while I offer skincare products, 80% of my customers care about this specific product. Well, that's going to reframe a lot of how I make the messaging, how I communicate, how I move them down the funnel, than if I think each product matters the same. So I think it just helps unlock working smarter and not working harder.
So that's a wrap. Sorry to cut this off a little bit, but Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Great
guys.
questions. He's going to be around, so ask him questions.
Yeah, thank you.